much, and thank you so much for having me here today, and a huge congratulations to the event organizers. This is going swimmingly, and also just a huge congratulations to 50 by 30 Waterloo Region overall. I hear about your group all the time in our meetings from elected officials and the amazing work that you're doing, so thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. And make sure I have my timer going so that I don't run over. So hello, everybody. My name is Alex Lidstone. I use she, her pronouns, and I am calling in from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, and all other people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. As Amy mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Climate Caucus, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So who are we? Climate Caucus is a non-partisan network of 460 plus locally elected climate leaders driving system change to transform our communities in 10 years. So some key things about our organization's identity is that we're science-based. So everything we do, we try to base on science, and the things that we follow typically are the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So local action matters. This slide is really about our why we exist as an organization. Arguably, internationally, we've been trying to govern climate change since around 1992 when the passing of the UNFCCC. However, as most of us have seen, not a lot of action has actually happened at that level. So we really believe that local governments are best placed for climate action, and there are a few reasons for that. One is they are on the front lines of climate change, so they really experience the floods, the droughts, the heat waves, and all of the impacts of that. Second is they can influence in Canada about half of emissions. So yeah, about half of Canadian emissions directly fall or indirectly fall under the control of local governments. Also, they can move more quickly than other orders of government. So I guess there's less people that they have to please, and they're also a really good place for pilot projects. So because of all of that and other reasons, we believe they're best placed for climate action, and we really exist to support locally elected officials in taking climate action. So 110.0 is our mandate. We shifted to this after our first about year or so of existing. This is because we realized that just focusing on climate wasn't really going to work, because you really have to make sure that you're thinking in systems, and some climate solutions really impact biodiversity or social justice. So it's important to make sure that these three pillars are together, and it stands for 1 planet, 10 years, and no one left behind. So it focuses on the biodiversity side, the 10 years is for climate change, and no one left behind is the social justice aspect. And this together made our sort of updated as of this year mission and vision for the organization. So our mission is to connect, support, and advocate for locally elected leaders to help drive the transformation of Canadian communities and achieve 110.0. And our vision is that by 2030, we're a network of socially just, resilient, healthy, regenerative, decarbonized communities thriving within planetary limits. So ideally, those sort of cover all of our 110.0 mandate and help to support locally elected officials. So now going into more exactly what we actually do as an organization, we support locally elected officials using these three pillars, essentially. So the first one is a meeting place. So we offer a support network for locally elected officials. Oftentimes we find locally elected say that they're the only green councillor on their council, or maybe their community is really like doesn't agree with them at all, and they're just sort of want to come and talk to other like-minded people. Other places they're maybe like a little more progressive or a little more like forward-thinking on climate action, and they are keen to come and share the resources and things that they've developed as a community, and they want to try and have other communities replicate it. So ultimately, we're a support network. Lots of our locally electeds say that it's nice to know that they have, 460 people in their corner when they're bringing difficult motions to council, which is, great to hear. We do this through different ways. So we have all caucus calls, which are for the whole network. So that includes like NGOs, some other supportive people, and our elected officials. We also have electeds only calls. So we have those twice a month, the national ones. And so those are only for elected officials. They can come. We have sometimes different topics. We have sometimes speakers coming in, or sometimes we just hold the space for people to sort of vent about their problems that they're having at the time. And we've also started doing regional chapters. So we have 4 that are going well right now. So you can connect with other locally elected officials in your region and talk about those specific problems. And you can do sort of our 3 pillars at a more regional level, which is nice. And then we also have some other groups for specific topics that may be relevant. So for example, we have one for rural and small communities, and one for outdoor rec communities. Our second pillar is that we're a hive mind, so we share resources. For example, we have a handbook, which I can go into a little bit later. We do webinars. We have a motions library, which is essentially a large database of motions that people have passed already, so you can kind of copy and paste them if you're interested in doing something. That's generally the gist of our hive mind. And then the final one is a lever for action. So this is advocacy to higher levels of government. In the Ontario chapter, there's lots of advocacy going on to the province. That's essentially all that the Ontario chapter does, which is great. We have done several federal submissions over the last year, and we're ironing out specific asks for our 2022 federal campaigns. And also last year, we had a very successful campaign in British Columbia called Help Cities Lead, where we were asking for a suite of different authorities for local governments to be able to govern buildings better. For example, asking for a PACE program, asking for home energy labeling and building benchmarking and things like that. And it worked really well because it came from staff in local governments originally saying what they were sort of missing, I guess, in terms of being able to effectively govern buildings. And then they moved that over to locally elected officials through Climate Caucus. And we were able to pull in some experts to write briefing notes and things to really train up our locally elected officials so they could understand exactly why they were asking for these things, exactly why they were needed. And then we were able to pass over 40 motions across the province for councils to send letters from mayor and council to the province and into the appropriate ministries. And then that was followed up by meetings from our steering committee with the provincial ministers. And it was very successful ultimately in the roadmap to 2030 from the province, which came out a couple of months ago. 4 out of 5 of our asks were included in there, which is great. And the 5th one is sort of vague as to the province is now saying that we actually did have the authority to do that. So they're essentially looking for a legal opinion so that local governments can go ahead and do that. So it was very successful, and we're looking to replicate that campaign in other provinces. So essentially, if we have the right mixture of locally elected officials who are keen, the same sort of type of issues around the authority of local governments bumping up against provincial acts that you might want to change so that you can do a better job governing climate change. And then, pulling in some experts and city staff, and we would love to do that again. So keep that in mind in Ontario. We would love to move it over here if you have thoughts on that. And I guess overall, through our 3 pillars, we have some good successes that have come out of these. For example, people have come and someone shared the other day on one of our calls, creative ways to fund staff positions for climate coordinators, which is cool. Everyone's sort of looking for funding for that and no one has it. But different people have found sort of workarounds through working with other organizations and things to fund this position. So it's a great thing to share around with other groups. We've also had lots of conversations about like how to implement climate lenses in your communities, and how to like connecting with other communities that have tried to do this and the different levels that they may be at. Other things are, we had a meeting on tips for effective council meetings, where 2 of our elected officials came in and shared what they've done and how they've been successful in that area. And also we've had meetings on ways to engage youth in council. So having like a youth representative on your council, or engaging with schools and things around. So those are just a few examples, but we have very interesting calls all the time. So encourage you to tune in. So in the last year, we have actually over 470 now elected officials. We represent over 200 communities, and we have 4 active regional chapters. We held 25 webinars. We have over 500 climate initiatives and 190 motions in our motions library. So that's all on our website if you want to go there. And then in terms of campaigns, we had our Help Cities Lead campaign, which I mentioned. We had UBCM resolutions, very strong Ontario advocacy, and 5 federal submissions. So some of our resources are listed here that we've developed. I believe this slideshow will be shared around, so you can check them out if you want. They're also all on our website, which is brand new, revamped as of 2 days ago, so climatecaucus.ca. And looking ahead, like I said, we plan to expand Help Cities Lead model to other provinces. We are hoping to have resolutions at municipal associations outside of BC. We're doing 3 federal advocacy campaigns this year. We aim to have over 500 elected officials in the network, and we are aiming to have 7 active regional chapters altogether, which is 3 more than we have right now. So overall takeaways, local action is necessary. You do not have to do this work alone, and your voice matters. So if you would like to get involved, you can head over to climatecaucus.ca, which I just said is a new revamped website, and you can join us. If you are a locally elected official, we have a special section for members only, where you can connect with other locally elected officials. We have a grants database. We have special video recordings from our electeds calls, which aren't available to anybody else. And we have our handbook, which is available to everybody else, and some other awesome resources. You can also email me, alex@climatecaucus.ca, and I can hook you up with anything else that you need. And I believe I still have a couple more minutes. So is that okay if I quickly go through one of our resources, Steph? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so actually, I just want to make mention that, you know, I was part of your recruitment team about 1.5 years ago, helping you guys with recruiting counselors. And what I found was when I called municipalities, that they would say, well, this one person is part of Climate Caucus, and then we hope that they will send the information back to us. But what we've been hearing a lot more is that this topic of climate change and the environment is multifaceted, and it's so interrelated to housing and flooding and building development and land use and sprawl, that I would find that every councillor would find resources to help them make the better decisions that they need to make, and also help them on their committees that they have. So my call to action is everyone needs to join. Every councillor needs to join Climate Caucus, and every single person in this meeting should be emailing their peers if you're a councillor already, or email your councillor, your elected official, and let them know that they need to join Climate Caucus. And even if it's just the point where if they're feeling overwhelmed and they don't know where to turn regarding a decision that's coming up, they at least have a peer support that they can reach out to. But yeah, so let's just show the database.
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, and I mean, I always say to people that we really are trying to do, like, as elected officials, you have to multi-solve with every decision you make. You're not just thinking about whatever thing that you're trying to solve. You also have to think about climate. You have to think about social justice. You have to think about land use and funding and all of these things. So we try to sort of help bring all of those things together, so you're not just focusing on one thing and you're trying to make the best decisions possible. Yeah, sorry, I will quickly share our Climate Action Committees section, just to give an example. So our wonderful, wonderful newest hire, Kiera, worked on this over the summer. And And I think it's a good example of sort of the type of work that we do, pulling everything together. So she essentially went around and interviewed a bunch of elected officials who have climate action committees, found out what their barriers were, what their challenges were, and what really, really worked. So she pulled together this document, which came up with sort of what are climate action committees, terms of reference, which she found was the most important part for your climate action committee, is that you have that you pull together a terms of reference and with clear dates and expectations for the committee, so that they're actually doing the work rather than just meeting and talking about things. So she included some examples about that in here. Sorry, it's just not scrolling, so. And my timer's going off, so I'll try to go quickly. But then she included suggestions for committee member selection. And overall, I think the most important part is her sort of barriers and how to overcome these, because that's something that a lot of people always complain about is, oh, I tried to do this and it didn't work. So she included all this list of potential challenges and ways to respond to it, which I think is really great. And finally, she also included a section on climate justice, equity, and diversity in climate action committees. So sort of what the barriers are, how to set them up so they're more accessible, and some various suggestions. And like I said, the most important part, I think, about all of the research in our handbook is that it's all coming from locally elected officials who have done this work already and have experience to share what worked for them, what their pushbacks were, and what they argued back. They shared their motions, so how they got it passed, and how it's been working in the long run. So this is one section of the handbook. There's a whole bunch of sections. I can drop the link in the chat, and the links are all also on my PowerPoint. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm sorry I went over time a little bit, but great conference, and I really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Alex. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. I am going